Okay, folks, so we're back for part two. So moving along and talking about kind of, what what kind of equipment we're dealing with and whatnot. So we just talked about how the ink gets to the substrate. Well, the next thing to understand is well, how do we make that ink stick to the substrate? And that's where drying is going to come into play. So flexo ink has to dry in between each station. It's really you can't really print wet ink on top of wet ink, and also there's rollers that the substrate, the web will wrap around, and if the ink's not dry, then it's just going to transfer onto these transfer rollers, and it's going to cause a really big mess. So sometimes presses have two different types. You have the interstation dryers that are in between each station. Then you also have a final, they call it tunnel dryer at the end that might fully dry it before it starts winding up. The interstation dryers, due to size constraints, might not be able to fully dry that ink before it's wound up at the end, or the press just may be moving too fast for that dryer to fully dry the ink. But what it does is it kind of gels it so that it doesn't transfer, and then at the end it runs through a bigger dryer that really fully will cure or dry the ink. So there's different types of dryers. Like I said, there could be the heated forced air, which is essentially, think of it like a big hair dryer. It's like a giant hair dryer, and it just blows the air on it. Pretty simple in concept. Let's just put it that way. But simple to understand. But it is there's a lot of work that goes into making these things, efficient. Below that, we're going to have another option that you may have on a press, or you might have both options on a machine, is a UV curing unit. And what a UV curing unit does is that as the web with the wet ink passes through it, it will blast a high intensity UV light at the ink. And what happens, which is pretty cool, is that when that light hits it, it excites the ink, and there are materials inside of the ink called photoinitiators that when that light hits it, it excites them, and that molecule branches with all the other molecules that are around it, and it locks onto it, and so it goes from a liquid to a solid virtually instantaneously. Pretty much like at the speed of light this occurs. So a lot of newer machines are going to have this type of technology. There's a lot of advantages to it. There's also some headaches that are related to it as well. But what happens is that it dries very, very quickly. It leads to very, very high press speeds, really nice, vibrant color, and also it's extremely durable, which is a big deal. So here's what's one of the things that I think really makes flexography stand out from the crowd, and that's the inline converting. This is not something you can really do on any other style of press other than flexo. And you can do things like cold foil, die cutting, laminating, slitting, perforating, sheeting, and a lot of these things we'll be learning about in class. So as you can see, there is a die that is right there. It's got raised blades on it. As it rotates, it punches holes out of the two-layer pressure-sensitive substrate, and it's cut, and then that waste is removed. This right here is just a stacker, so it sheets it, and then it will stack it up so that it can be put into a box and shipped to the client. Here is a short video of die cutting. So he's just kind of tightening it up. He's going to pull up that waste. We call that waste the matrix. Just pulls it on up. And that's die cutting. So there are different configurations of flexo presses. Different reasons to choose each one of these. You got inline, stack, central oppression, and corrugated. So the one that we were looking at earlier, and the ones that we have in our press room, are inline presses. So the thing that really separates this from the other ones is that all of the print units are aligned horizontally. Okay, and this right here is one of the most common configurations that are out there in today's world. There's a lot of good to it, and what I mean by that is that it's easy to access each of those stations. If there's a problem, you can see down into it very easily, and it makes a lot of sense for the operator to utilize. Each one of the print stations are separate from each other, and it creates a path that essentially goes in a line. So, and especially when a press is smaller, like the ones that we have in our lab, they're virtually all inline configured presses. So, there's different ways of kind of thinking about it. You still got you got all 4 cylinders right there, and each one of those stations is separate. So when it comes to inline presses, some of the most important markets are going to be your folding carton markets and your tags and label type markets. Lots and lots of those, aren't there? And that's just, those are just 2 aisles in one supermarket in one little place in the world. So think about how many aisles like this are in the world, and how many of these packages and labels do they need. So another style of press is called a stack press, and it's kind of similar to an inline press, but the difference is that the print stations are stacked on top of each other. There's some reasons to go this route. Some of those reasons might be that it takes up a smaller footprint. It just takes up less space because it goes up and down. Here's another kind of version of it. But so a lot of times when these are the types of presses, that, number one, they're very large. They're usually ones that take a very, very large roll of paper that will go on it. When I say large, I don't just mean like how much paper we're talking about. I'm also talking about the width of it as well. And that's when these are commonly used because, when you start talking about, a very, very wide substrate that's going on a big diameter roll, you need a lot of space for this. So this minimizes some of that the space concerns with something like that. You don't see these as much as you used to back in the day, because now you can do a whole lot more with a smaller machine. So a lot of these are kind of phased out. This type of machine is a lot of times what like a newspaper would use, or maybe a printer that makes a lot of junk mail, so to speak. Things like that. So, and it's also things that we're not utilizing nearly as much as we used to. So one of the advantages of these is that, you can put some pretty robust dryers in between the stations that can dry a lot of ink at a very high speed. Here's a video of a stack press right here. And you can see that you've got 1, 2, 3 stations stacked on top of each other. So one of the downsides to it, as you can imagine, is like getting up to that top one might be a little tricky. So one of the biggest market segments that we're going to see in this type of thing is envelopes. What's kind of funny is that this seems like something that's definitely yesteryear, but there is over the last year, there's been a big uptick in sales of this type of product. So those companies that were, like some of the last companies that were really doing this type of production have really seen some big increases in the last year. So kind of interesting to think about how like everything's cyclical. Like 20 years ago, this was something that was really important, then it stopped being important, and now it's important again, because what they're finding is that all that junk mail that we used to just throw away, well, people are reading it nowadays, which is kind of surprising that the responses on this type of marketing has gone up a lot in the last year, which is not something I would have expected. Now, the newest style of configuration is called the central impression press. Now, this one is a little bit different. Each of the print stations is kind of shared as one. So what happens is that, so this is the ink station, and we've got 1, 2, 3 cylinders. We've got our metering cylinder, our analogs, and our plate. So what happened to that impression cylinder? Well, we go back to, what's the name of this one? Central impression. So there's one very large cylinder here, and all of the print stations utilize that one centralized impression cylinder. Now, the big advantage of this is now our web is not going and snaking around a whole bunch of different rollers and whatnot, and it's just pulled tautly around one cylinder. This makes the tension on the press very, very consistent. It also allows for some very fast speeds. There are some downsides to it, and some of those downsides would be the between station dryers, because like there's so much technology all crammed into one little area. The drying stations can be kind of small. Now, if you're using that UV technology that I mentioned earlier, where it goes from a liquid to a solid like that, if you got those kinds of curing units on there, you can run some very, very fast speeds on this type of press, and that's really what it was designed for. These can be small, or they can be very, very large. These are kind of things that you're going to really see a lot of flexible packaging coming out of. So you think about it, if you were to take one of these bags of chips and you unfolded it all the way, it's going to be pretty sizable. You're looking at probably 2 feet by at least a foot for that one package right there. We don't really ever think of our chip bags as something that's laid out flat, but that's how it's produced, and then it's converted into that package through trimming and sealing. So they can be very large, but they could also be fairly small as well. So the last style of press that we'll talk about is a corrugated press. So this one is a little bit different. The print stations are very similar. They still have the 4 cylinders in place that we need, but it doesn't run off of a web. It doesn't run off of a roll-to-roll. You can't really put corrugated on a roll-to-roll. But what you can do is that you can use a vacuum system that goes and picks up the sheet and then feeds it into the printing device, or into the printing press. These machines are usually very large and also pretty expensive. But what you can do with them is really pretty interesting. And this is also an area of the market that is growing at a very quick pace. The level of quality that comes off one of these machines is so much better than even it was 5 years ago. The quality and detail that we're getting off these machines is really impressive. And I think if you've bought anything that comes in a package like this, it's always going to have some bright, vibrant graphics on it. Think about if you've bought a laptop, and you've ever seen that package that it came in, those graphics are bright, vibrant, and high quality. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, if you bought a similar type product, it maybe had one color on it. It surely didn't have a photographic image on it. And it'd be mainly just bold or line type artwork that's on it. So, advances in press technology and plate technology allows us to put those really high-end graphics onto corrugated materials. So the corrugated market, especially with the explosion of craft beer and shipment organizations like Amazon and whatnot, have really fueled a growth in this area. So it's something that I think a lot of people just very much so take for granted, but it is very much so a big part of our consumer lives. All right, so that kind of hits upon some of the, what's printed by Flexo, what does a Flexo press look like, kind of gets you familiar with some of the vocabulary and then also some of the machinery that are there. But what I want to just kind of finish things up with is going to be talking about, well, what does this process look like? From start to finish, where does this go? How does it work? So there's a lot that goes into producing a package. So the thing is where everything starts is going to be a need. It's going to start with a need. Like a company, a consumer product company, is going to have a product. Let's just say that it's shampoo. They're going to have this shampoo, and they're like, well, I want to get this shampoo to consumers out there. Well, the thing is they can't just send them a whole big blob of goo. You got to have something to put it into. And then once you have something to put it into, you got to make that thing that you just put it into look really pretty. So there's a lot to that. So the first thing that starts is a need. They have a product that they want to package. So at this stage, the things that are identified are like, well, what does the package need to do? What does it need to look like? Are there any marketing goals that the package needs to adhere to? Like, for example, are there any particular colors that need to be going on it? Or are they trying to hit upon a certain demographic of consumer? Those sorts of things need to be talked about in this initial stage. Things like shape, size, possibly substrates are determined at this point. There's a lot of jobs really at this section. It could be product marketing and advertisement, packaging designer. There's also representatives from the consumer product company that would be working with the professionals at this level. So essentially, a need's determined, and then how to fulfill that need from a physical means is started to be determined. So what it looks like doesn't really come into play until you get to the graphic design stage. So the graphic designer will work with the CPC. They will also be working with the print company so that whenever they do create the graphics for the product, that they have a good expectation of how that is going to be produced as it moves beyond them. There's a lot of ways that a graphic designer can work with the people that are going to take that file after them, so that number one, that they're generating a really nice high quality design that reflects what that what that CPC wants to say about that product. They're creating a brand or they're displaying a brand in a way that makes a consumer want to pick up that product and take it home with them. So the look and the content of the package is determined. Decisions on things like inks, coatings, and substrates need to be incorporated into the stage. It's not all about like, oh, I'm going to go put together this really pretty picture on the computer. I really need to think about, what can I do? It's more than just what I can create on the screen. It's like I can make decisions about, well, what do I want the substrate to look like? Do I want to use like a metallic foil substrate that's shiny, and then when the inks lay on top of it, it makes those inks look metallic? Do I want it? Do I want that package to have like a nice soft feel to it? Do I want it to have a very high gloss look to it? It's not just about, creating the graphics in Illustrator or Photoshop. It's about thinking about, what is this going to look like in the consumer's hands? And the better that the designer understands what the next process is going to be, the better they can utilize that process into their design, so that they can really satisfy the needs of their clients. So you can be a graphic designer at this stage, maybe an art director. There's a lot of consultants that work at this stage as well, people that consult on both sides of the field, whether it's from the graphic creation or from the print side of it. So this is one of the stages of production. And then you kind of get to what we would call a production artist. So the production artist takes what the graphic designer did, and they've got to figure out a way to make this work. So the graphic designer might provide a design, and then this person would go and decide, well, okay, so we're going to have to use, in order to reproduce this color, we're going to have to use a special ink. We need to take this design, we need to lay it out into a die or a die line. They need to go and add printer's marks to it. They also need to be able to thoroughly understand how that color is going to be represented down the line. This is also the person that, once they go and do these sorts of things, will make a digital representation of what it's going to look like coming off the press, and then work with the graphic designer and the CPC to get approvals before it's taken to the next level. So a production artist essentially gets to go and take the design and rework it using, applications, the same design applications like Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop, but also use a lot of specialty type software to make sure that the color is correct, to apply compensations for the artwork, and so that whenever it does go to the press, that it will look as pristine as possible. So really, in my personal opinion, a lot of the quality of the finished product is going to come from how talented this person right here at this stage is. So there's a lot of different kind of employment options at this stage. You could be what's called a pre-press technician, color separator, or a color management specialist. So people that really have a strong understanding of controlling color, number one, are kind of hard to come by, which makes them desirable, and also makes it so that they're paid well. So now the next stage is to work with your suppliers to the market. So these are the people that make the materials or the technology that's going to be implemented into the print job. So it could be simple things like plates, but it could be more elaborate things like inks or substrates. Some employment opportunities would be lab technicians, technical support, sales and marketing, product manager, customer service. There's a lot of things in going into this. Like think for a minute. Let's just say that you have a consumer product company that is extremely particular about their corporate colors. Like for example, Coca-Cola. All right, so Coca-Cola, everybody knows that Coke Red. If you saw a can a football field away, you could tell me if that was a Coke can or not. And it's simply because of that color of red that Coca-Cola has been, driving into our the world's brain for like almost 100 years now. They're very particular about their red. So you better make sure that they're getting the exact red that they want. So custom ink may have to be formulated to reproduce that color. You have people as well that would produce things like plate materials, those sorts of things. You might be incorporating a specialty type material into it, like a film or a foil. You might be embossing it. You might need to deal with a die cutting company. You might have to buy some new tooling. You might have to have some specialty type parts, maybe a special type of analox that goes into that press. So the thing to understand is that there is a plethora of jobs like this. And the nice thing about being in the Charlotte area is that there is quite a few of these industry suppliers that have locations or are based right here out of Charlotte. For an example of that would be Harper Corporation. Our courses take place at Harper campus. That should say an awful lot about how important the supplier's role is to this industry, but also how profitable the suppliers can be in this industry. I really push our students to go and work for the suppliers. The reason being is because the students that go on to work with those suppliers, they have a lot of opportunity to kind of move up the ranks and whatnot. And our students too, they have a strong technical knowledge whenever they go out in an industry that puts them at a higher level position than a lot of companies. Puts them at a higher level within a company because of their education. Because there's unfortunately not a lot of this type of education in the world, but that gives our students a big advantage and whatnot. So, all right, moving forward. All right, so then kind of the last stage of this is going to be the printing, the printer and the converter. So this is where the package is actually printed, it's when the ink, hits the substrate, so to speak. And there's a lot of skills that an employee that works in this realm needs to have. And there's a lot of different opportunities within a print company or a converting company. It could be something just like a press operator. You may think, oh, I don't know if I'd want to operate a machine for day in and day out. But the thing is running a machine like this it's not going to be the same thing day in, day out. Every day is going to bring a different new challenge, and at the end you are producing something that you're taking ink and paper and a variety of other materials, and you're taking it and turning it into something that somebody is going to be very happy to buy and consume. So you're adding a ton of value to a product by working in this area. And it's not just a day of pushing buttons and lifting and grunting. It takes a strong mind, and it takes a creative mind in order to be able to find solutions, to be able to make things happen. It's also, a lot of it too is troubleshooting, because there's going to be issues, and you've got to be able to fix those issues that occur as it moves through the moves through the company. So some of the options you have are like press operator. And the other thing we'll go ahead and say is that an experienced pressman can make some pretty darn good money. I know there's a company in town that they have press operators that make $35 an hour. And you think about $35 an hour, and then, if you get a few hours of overtime every week, dude, that's a pretty high-end salary right there. It's a whole lot better than I make, I'll tell you that much. But I will also say, don't expect to go into anything making $35 an hour. That's an experienced, a veteran one. But a good press operator can easily make $20 an hour starting, $17 to $20 starting, and whatnot. But you also need people like ink technicians. You need production managers. You gotta have sales reps. job planner, shipping manager. I mean, there's a plate making. There is a wide variety of jobs that are in there. So, even if maybe you didn't want to run a press every day, there are some options that need this kind of education. So, at the end of the day, what I want you guys to take away from this is that the flexo industry is not just a press operator. It's far from it. That's one small, well, I'm not going to say it's small, but it's one position out of quite a few for this this entire process to happen. So there's a wide range of careers out there. There's always opportunity. I mean, right now, just within the last week, I've talked to 2 companies that want to hire 6 employees, and that's just what's come to me this week. I didn't even go searching for it. That's the phone calls that I received. So, and print companies right now they're dying to hire people. And if you have an education, they are going to they're going to want to talk to you. Most of my students that are in the advanced level classes are, most of them are working, semi full time to part time at print companies, and they haven't even graduated. So, getting in the door, having some knowledge on this can get you in the door and get you making some money. And also, let's just say you don't want to get your hands dirty at all. Not at all. Let's say you want to be a graphic designer or even a pre-press technician. There's a variety of positions out there along those lines. But what I will stress is the more you understand what happens after the design phase, the better you can be a designer. So I encourage you, regardless of what your goals are, is to learn as much of the process as you can. All right, so that wraps up part 2. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.